far away from the mountains of Tyrol, from the snowy mountains of Tyrol, to tell you a little bit about our project and what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how. Some of you might wonder a little about the title, Ethical Banking. What has this to do with language resources? Well, it has to do with the motivation for what we are doing. So we noticed that there are some similarities to ethical banks. It's probably a new concept to most of you, I guess, because it's not been around that long. But I'll walk you through it. So, the first part is about this why aspect. So, why are we doing this? What is our motivation? Then the second part of the presentation is a bit more about the details of the project itself, what it's about, so what we're doing. And the third part goes a little bit into more technical detail. It explains a little how we are handling our resources. So let's start with this banking analogy. Banks banks haven't enjoyed a very good reputation recently because of the worldwide banking crisis, and this has to do with some, let's say, characteristics of banks that they have traditionally had, and that have led to problems as well. Let's look at a couple of these. There's been little transparency. You never knew exactly what the banks are doing with everybody's money. Little responsibility. They did things maybe not everybody agreed upon or was really interested in letting them do these things. For example, fund nuclear energy, arms dealers, weapons, wars, and so on. Also, there's been little accountability. You never knew who exactly was responsible for anything that might have gone wrong, and how to hold them accountable, how to make them responsible for their actions. And their main goal, of course, is private profit. So they're trying to earn a profit. In general, there's nothing wrong about that. But it can lead to problematic things. And so the bottom line here is that this has led to a huge, overwhelming, inaccessible financial market nobody really knows how to deal with. But there's an alternative, and this is ethical banks. These are banks that try to do things differently and that have different goals in mind. So they try to do something about all these aspects that I've listed before. For example, they're trying to conduct their business transparently. So the customer is supposed to know what they're doing with their money. They're trying to act responsibly, so not fund anything that destroys the environment or that causes wars or that makes wars more atrocious. There's also supposed to be a lot more, up to full accountability, so you're supposed to know who does what with your money and who's responsible for these actions. And their main goal is rather the public good. They also do earn profits, but their main goal is, to do something socially relevant and something in the interest of the public good. And the bottom line here is that they're gathering money in order to make good things possible and not just earn a profit. So this picture tries to symbolize this. You gather money, and with this you can do something positive, move something towards a positive goal. Now let's look at the language data market, because this has a couple of similarities in common with the financial market. There's little transparency, little responsibility, little accountability, and their main goal is private profit. So just think of Google, Microsoft, Facebook. All of them are gathering huge amounts of language data. And nobody knows what they're doing with them exactly. there's little responsibility, so they can do or seem to be able to do with those data whatever they want. Little accountability. Nobody knows who are the exact people who are doing these things and what to do if they do something that might be considered wrong by the majority of the population. And their main goal, again, is private profit. So in this case also we have an overwhelming inaccessible market, which in this case is a data market or a language data market. And a part of this, of course, is the translation data market, which is again a part of the language data market. And it looks a little like this, if you want to symbolize it. It's a huge wave of data that's being collected and handled by a few very large players. And yeah, it can be daunting, especially against the background of the major digitalization that's going on in the world. So this let's just briefly recap. This is our basic motivation for initiating our project, because the situation that I just described leads to a fragmented data scape or data landscape, which consists of these large players. Of course, there are also smaller players, but they are not that well connected. A problem which, of course, CLARIN is also very aware of. And also, this is something that we too want to do something about. And yeah, these smaller players are, sometimes in the academic domain and describe their data pretty well, or at least try to gather high quality data. But they don't have amounts that are so large as, for example, Google or Facebook might have. So you can either decide in favor of quantity or quality nowadays, seemingly. So you have these large players who have huge amounts of data, which are sometimes not really well described or labeled, and a bit chaotic, but with neural machine translation engines, for example, data quality isn't that much of an issue as, for example, it is in an academic context. Or you have quality with smaller, fragmented, little connected players in academia, for example. And yeah, this constitutes a lack of collaboration, of course. And now let's take a look at what we are trying to do about this with our project.
So yeah, this is the part where I take over. First of all, in the next a few minutes, you're going to listen, hear some things that may already sound familiar to you, that draw upon what we've heard about the goals of CLARIN, about some initiatives, about the legal aspects of translation data. So we are very happy that we had all those introductory sessions, so to say, on which we can build upon now. So first of all, what is the Transbank project about? I will provide you with a very short answer first, and then I will give you a longer answer. So the short answer is Transbank is going to be a universal general purpose repository of parallel translation data, which has two main features. The first one is that it is expected to equally serve the needs of all stakeholders in translation. And the second feature is that users can contribute their data in order to ensure sustainability of data reuse. Whoever feels he or she has data that is worth being shared with the community can be included into our collection. So this is the short answer. But now let's go more into detail and let's look at the goals, which I hope will make it clearer to you what we are trying to achieve. So first of all, our collection that we are going to build is open-ended and growing. And we're going to collect the most various kinds of translations, which means parallel text, source and target text paired at the sentence level. And here an important aspect is that being a growing resource, with time, it will be larger and more diverse. It will cover hopefully more different types of translation, different modes of translation, different language pairs, and so on. The second important goal that we are trying to achieve relates to the responsibility aspect that Andy mentioned before. We need to make sure that we treat data contributed by users fair, without the risk of infringing intellectual property, data privacy issues, and so on. And only in that manner we can ensure that people are willing to reuse and share data. So all data that we are going to include in the collection are to be legally cleared first, which is to be ensured by a strong legal framework designed by experts in the field of legal aspects in the language technology field. The third aspect of our goals relates to the quality issues Andy mentioned before. We have to walk a tightrope between quality and quantity, and here metadata comes into play. We have heard a lot of about metadata, and from our perspective, metadata is important to describe the texts in the collection for one, but for the other, the relation that holds between target texts and the respective source text. I will tell you much more about metadata in a few minutes. So for now, I will just tell you that our goal is to devise a metadata label set that is specific to translation, and we're going to apply this set of labels to mark up the collection. And the fourth important aspect, which also relates to the ethical banking principles to create something for the public, is to make the data freely available to the whole community. And here we are not going to draw a line between commercial and non-commercial use. We want to be the resource to be equally interesting for companies, for researchers, for all who are involved in translation. So therefore, data is going to be freely available. And we have been talking about metadata a lot, and it's a central aspect of our project. But why do we focus that strong on metadata? So here I have an analogy for you. Imagine you're a small child playing around in the cupboard of the kitchen, and there is a set of similar looking bottles. How are you going to know which bottle contains something good or something bad for you? From which bottle you can drink safely in hope of finding sweet, tasty juice, and where is some dangerous substance hidden? So of course the answer is you need labels that describe the content of the bottles. Only then you can make sure that you find exactly what you want. And the same applies to translation data. I mean, if you have a large corpus, a large collection in many, many languages, you have to know what is inside of those texts if you want to get any use out of them. So the metadata set that we are developing describes how, when, and under what circumstances texts and their translations have been produced, because we want you to be happy data users who find exactly that cookie jar that you were looking for, or in other words, that type of translation data that is relevant to your research question, to your industry application, or in a more general sense, to your translation-related problem. And this brings us to the methodological part, how we are going to achieve this. So first we have to focus on the sources that are going to be mined, so to say, for our collection, or in other words, from where is data going to be contributed to our repository. Transplant is going to establish a network between 4 major groups of stakeholders. The first one up there in the top of the slide are companies that create multilingual international content. Like, for example, I know, hotels or ski resorts in Tyrol or something like that. The second group are representatives of academia, and this does not only include researchers who compile corpora, but also, for example, student translations produced in translation training programs, which can be a highly interesting and valuable resource for didactic and pedagogical questions. The third group of stakeholders who hopefully will contribute data are language service providers, both individual as well as company-based ones. And the fourth group are multilingual institutions and organizations, like, for example, political bodies such as the EU, but also large multilingual community-based projects such as Wikipedia or Translators Without Borders, who create data that is freely available on a Creative Commons license, for example. Well, and how are we going to make this collected data available? Well, here a key concept that we are already familiar with is the faceted search. We are developing a hopefully highly user-friendly interface that will allow you to specify using the metadata description the kind of data you're looking for. And with this feature, you will be able to download your subcorpora on demand in various output formats. And all this is embedded in an open access policy to make data as sustainably and largely widely usable as possible. So to draw a quick conclusion in between, we are trying to collect data as much as possible, as diverse translation data as possible. We are trying to establish a platform that facilitates sharing of data. This hopefully will foster collaboration between researchers on the one hand, but also between various groups of interest of stakeholders in translation. And the main goal is the public good, in this context, the public good of translation in a very general sense. And the bottom line here is the transparent infrastructure that we are currently developing. Now, we decided to devote a couple of minutes on the more interactive part. We have been talking about this metadata label set that is going to describe the relation between target text and source text, and this is a very abstract concept. So therefore, we have prepared a mock-up of the future faceted search interface that already includes all the relevant metadata categories that we are going to use to describe the text in our collection. And we encourage you to open this link, transparent.info/mockup. It works on mobile devices as well. And here you are able to see, hopefully, yes, it works. A simulation of our future. I see it on my computer here.
I think you have to minimize PowerPoint.
With F5? No. Minimize.
And then
No.
pull this to the other screen, because you have two screens.
There are two screens. Andy, please help me.
I'll try.
Yeah, so this is just a simulation, a mock-up of the future search interface where you can see a lot of fields where you can specify the criteria of a collection of texts to be later to be downloaded subsequently. For example, imagine you want to train a machine translation system, let's say from English to, Spanish. You will just care about the language direction, so you just specify here the language pair, and then you scroll to the bottom of the page, select the output format, and you can already download the data. But if you're, for example, a translation scholar who is interested in more intricate features of translation, you might, for example, look for text that, like, for example, you would like to investigate how female literature was translated by man. So you have to narrow down the search results to look for source texts that are translated by female authors, written by female authors, because we're here on the source text side of the search interface, and on the target text side of the search interface you can specify the gender of the translator, so a human being of male gender, and this would give you the opportunity to download a very specific subcorpus. And now the remaining minutes we would like to give you the opportunity to play around with the interface, and while doing so you can ask us questions. You can ask us questions that are not related to the search interface, to the project in general, and I hope that in this way we are going to be able to provide you with immediate feedback. So the search interface might appear a little bit daunting and scaring in the very first moment because there is a lot of descriptors, but I think after clicking around you will get a feeling that those categories are familiar to you as specialists in the field of translation. So just take your time, and whenever you have a question, please feel free to ask for our support.